friends, and welcome back for another Brutus Monroe video. This is Cassie. We're going to be making a fall card today, so let's talk about what we're using. This is the Falliday Silhouette stamp set. We're also going to be using the Farmhouse Friends stamp set. I want to use that little truck in there. And then I want to make a thank you, so I'm going to pull in the Super Sentimental stamp set and use this thank you sentiment right there. I wanted to show you that recently I bought a ton of cardstock and matching envelopes. I love doing that. I'm going to be making a slimline card today, so I won't be using those envelopes, but there you go. To trim down my slimline, I'm going to cut 4 inches off of here and then trim this down to 3.5 inches because my panel will be basically 7 inches by 8.5 inches, and then I'll score that at 3.5 so that it'll be 3.5 by 8.5 when it's all folded up. I have some alcohol-friendly cardstock in here, mostly because I'm going to do some alcohol coloring on there, but I'm going to start with that Falliday Silhouettes, and I've got my leaves in there. I inked that up with some Over the Moon ink, which is a little bit lighter yellow orangey ink, and then I'm going to do what I did the last time, which is just kind of ink up the edges, and I am using the color Guppy. So these are all Simon Hurley inks. Those are carried in the Brutus Monroe store. And I'm using a microfiber cloth just in the center there to get rid of some of the harsh lines. And I like how that's looking. Last time, if you remember, if you watched that video where I used these leaves the last time, I used 3 colors. And to be honest with you, I think I like the 3 colors the best. But you can absolutely do the same thing using just 2 colors. So we're going to do it again, but we're going to make some red leaves. I'm going to start with some Bee Sting. That's a lighter red color. And you'll notice my stamps are very stained, and that really doesn't affect, no, not really doesn't, it doesn't affect at all the stamping. So don't worry if your stamps get a little bit stained, it's not a big deal. Now I'm going to use the Game Over ink, it's one of the new ones. And so I'm just inking up those edges once again, and then bringing in my microfiber cloth to soften some of those edges. This is basically called the rock and roll technique, which is one of my favorite techniques to use when you're using solid images. Now I'm going to bring in the little truck from the Farmhouse Friends stamp set, and I'm going to ink that up with some Raven Detail ink. I'm using that because I plan to do some alcohol marker coloring, which is also why I used the alcohol marker cardstock from the Brutus Monroe store. So I'm going to stamp that a couple times, which is why it was great to have this inside of my MISTI. You could do this without a MISTI, obviously, but it does help with the stamping, and it makes it that much easier to kind of flip it and, you know, not have to move your stamps around too much. So just like I'm lining them up here, and I'm going to ink those up with some brown ink, you'll be able to, once you ink that up, you flip it, and you can do the red leaves as well. So we are going to just ink those up, and I'm only going to stamp it once. I kind of want that to be a little bit subtle, and then we'll flip it and we'll ink it up again. And there you go. Now we're going to move on to doing our coloring, which is some fairly easy coloring. I'm just bringing in a couple different colors that I have. Those will be up on the screen for you. And I love this truck. I just think this truck is so cool. It kind of reminds me of, see, I grew up in a small town. I've said that many times before, and we always had like the county fair, and people would bring their trucks and their old cars around, which was always so neat to go and look at. My dad was a mechanic, and so, you know, we always had to go and look at the trucks and look at the cars, and he always wanted to check out their engines, and so yeah, I do remember that very well from my childhood. So I'm just coloring this. I don't know if there's a yellow truck out there. My first inclination was actually to color it blue or to color it red, but I really wanted that to pop on my background, so I decided to color it yellow. And then we're going to bring in some W's, because the colors that I have chosen, the reds and the yellows, are more warm tones, so I'm using the warm grays for my tires. And I think the white wall tires are very cool, so we'll bring in some W4 to lighten up the bumper. And clearly I don't know if I'm coloring this correctly, but you know, that's the fun of stamping and coloring, is you do it how you want to do it. It's your card. So we'll color in the rims, and then bring in a W8 for the tires, and also on the inside of the truck. And then we'll do the same thing on the other truck. And then we're going to fussy cut everything out. I know some of you are cringing, but these are fairly easy images to fussy cut. Just kind of move your paper as you go. Keep your scissors fairly stable, and you'll have these all cut out in no time. So I'll cut out both trucks and all of the leaves. And then we're going to start working on our panel. I decided I wanted to pull in this stencil. This was the stencil of the month from a few months ago. But it's such a great stencil, and I believe it's still in the store. So we're going to use some pixie spray on the back of this because it's a fairly intricate stencil, and I want to do some ink blending on it. And I've got my Game Over ink. It matches perfectly with this Marsala cardstock. And then I am just going to randomly put some of that ink on that background. I'm not going to completely cover it, which is why I'm using the smaller, the little mini Ergo brush. And then I'll just pull that over to the side and we'll just keep inking. That's another reason why I wanted it to be fairly sporadic, is because I wasn't sure how well I could line up the stencil to be a continuous stencil across a slimline card. And then I'm lining that back up because I want there to be some darker areas on that left-hand side. We'll pull that back, and then we're going to get ready to stamp out our sentiment. I want to show you how important it is to use a magic powder bag. See, I put some of the ink, I put some of the Alabaster embossing powder over the top of that, and it stuck to where the ink was. So now I'm going to use my magic powder bag. We're going to test it again, and you'll see that the powder isn't sticking to where it shouldn't stick. I'll use the embossing ink to stamp out my sentiment, and then I will just dump off the excess, and then we'll heat that with our heat tool till everything is smooth and melted, and you'll know that it is because it'll go from a matte finish to shiny. And I love that Alabaster. As you well know if you've watched me at all, that is some of my absolute favorite white embossing powder. I'll just use my microfiber cloth to get rid of all the residue from the magic powder bag, and then we're going to get ready to start adhering all of our pieces to our panel. I'm going to use liquid glue to adhere down our little truck, and then I want to use foam tape on the back of all of my leaves to adhere these down to the front of the card. So I'm just going to tack that down. This is the Brutus Monroe tape, and it's black, which is great because when you look from the side, it'll be dark. And I'm just going to pop these down. They're going to overlap just a little bit. That's why you'll notice that I don't have foam tape all over the back of those leaves. I have it, mostly just in the middle areas. And so I'll just peel off the release paper, put those down, and then just keep going like this one. But I wanted to make sure that I went kind of red, yellow, and it just looks like that little truck is tucked behind there, which is kind of fun. I am going to trim off just a part of this leaf because I couldn't remember how I had originally thought about putting it down. So we're just going to trim off the stem, and then we can tuck that in underneath very nicely, and then we'll peel off the release paper on this final leaf and stick that down to the front of our card to finish off the front panel. Now I'm going to pull in my card base, and remember this was cut to 7 inches by 8.5 inches, so I'm going to score this at 3.5 inches. And there really is no set size for a slimline card, but this is what fits. You just check your envelopes and see what will work best, but this is the size that I find that works best for the envelopes that I have and the envelopes that I make. I'll tack down the last 2 leaves that I have inside the card, and then we'll put the little truck over the top of it, and that's going to finish off the inside of our card. And then I'll use that same liquid glue to adhere down our card panel to our card base. And once that is on there, that's going to finish off our fall thank you card. And I really am happy with how this one turned out. So if you liked this video, please hit the like button. Please subscribe if you haven't already done so. And thank you so much for stopping by, and I will see you very soon in another video. Bye, everybody.